Hi everybody, Nigel here, welcome back to the channel, and here we are with this big bad buff build for beginners, and this is part 3. So if you remember, in part 2 we glued together our main pylons with the big beam adapters, and then we got our multiple racks there. And then in part 1 we glued together, oh no, it was part 2, wasn't it? We glued together our engine pylons and all our bombs. So we got all our bombs here. And then in part 1 we did our undercarriage legs with the Mr. Surfacer and the ejector pin marks, so we're going to get rid of that today. And we also did our wheels and tyres. So for today's work we're going to need our undercarriage legs, excuse me, and all of this can go to one side and all be left to dry. So what we're going to do now is look at these ejector pin marks, and as you can see, this is where I put the Mr. Surfacer on them. So what we need to do now is sand that down just to smooth it out, to get rid of the ejector pin mark. The ejector pin marks, if you don't know, when the mould halves come together, they come apart. The plastic would rather stay in the mould than come out. So the ejector pins are basically metal pins that push out, and they push the part out of the mould. Sometimes in America they're referred to as knockout pins. So what we need to do that is something hard. If we use something soft like this sponge here, what will happen is when you sand it, the sponge will go down into the ejector pin. So rather than making a flat surface, you'll just make a divot in the surface. So we need something hard. So I'm going to use a file. That's no good. That's a round file. What's this one here? It should do. So here we've got a flat file, and I'm just going to use the end of the flat file just to remove the excess around the outside of the ejector pin. Now this one here isn't so important because it's hidden behind the wheels, so if we still got some remnants of that left, it doesn't matter. But this one here we want to try and get rid of. So we can file away there just like that, and you can see on this one here you can see the excess, and I can just come in there and file away. I'm not putting any pressure on it, I'm just gently filing. I don't want to go gouging the plastic or anything, or making any big marks in it. There we go. Okay, so we can see there that we've got all of that done. There we go. The same on that one. And that's that done. There we are. So that's all done, and ejector pin marks gone. Okay, or as good as. And then if you want to, you could just lightly go over with a sander just to remove any of those marks you may have put in with the file. But that is just basically to remove those marks, not to try and sand out the Mr. Surfacer. So there we go, and that Mr. Surfacer has been left about 24 hours to dry. Because it's quite deep and you've put it on quite thick, it needs to be, it needs, you know, a good drying time. If you try and do it too soon, it'll just pull it all out. Okay, so that's those done. So next we're going to move along to actually getting some painting done. I spoke too soon. I said we're going to get some painting done. I think we need to do a little bit of pre-assembly first. So the next step of the instructions, now we've got our landing gear done, we're going to fit the landing gear and the landing gear bay roofs into the fuselage. Just for those out there looking for accuracy, we've got front and rear landing bays, so they're labelled 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 have the identical roofs. The front landing gear base should be a lot more complex. So accuracy wise, this is one letdown of this kit. There aren't many letdowns of this kit, but this is one of them. So basically, so it's saying here repeat strut mounting for front opening. So we're going to do the same thing front and back. So we're going to get our sprues out, and I'm looking for the relevant sprues that I need with the undercarriage bays in them. And here they are. So got a bag of sprues here. A comment was made, or actually had an email question sent to me about not washing the parts. I haven't washed the parts, no, and I did explain in part 1 of the video that I would be not washing the parts because there's so much handling, because it's such a simplistic kit. So basically, normally I would wash all the parts, but the thing is, we know that we've got a lot of work to do with fettling with these engines. The tailplanes and everything, or they're massive areas, you know. These parts inside, we're going to clean them before we paint them. So really, with a kit like this that's so basic and so simple, it's not really worth spending the time to wash the parts. Most modelers don't wash their parts anyway, as far as I'm aware, but it is something you should do. I mean, I can feel these parts feel slightly oily, only slightly, nothing much, but yeah. So I'm going to take a 220 grit sanding stick. These are, again, these Infini zebra sticks. You want a nice hard flat stick for doing stuff like this. You don't want to be using a sponge or anything soft. You want something hard that won't actually give you a rounded off edge or anything, because these are quite flashy. There's flash all around the edges. Well, I mean, which you would expect. I mean, this model is 1999, so you know, when you think about it, 1999, what's that, 21 years ago, the mould for this kit at that point was 31 years old. So you know, it's getting on. And when you think the newest B-52s flying were made in 1961, some say 1965, it's actually 1961. Yeah, 59 years old is the newest B-52 flying. So there's our undercarriage bay roofs. Now we need to get our fuselage halves out of the box. So just pull one out here. And as we start to get through this, we can start to get to the point where we can get rid of the box, because it's quite big and cumbersome. So we've got our fuselage halves here. Here's one of them, and this is the one we're going to be working with at the moment. So what it's telling us to do here is to assemble the landing gear this way round into here, okay? And sorry, that was my stomach, excuse me. So it's telling us to put that in there like that, okay? I'm guessing somehow in there like that, and then fit it in. Now I'm looking here on the side of the fuselage, and it would appear that we've got these, excuse, my dog's going to bark in a minute. So that's going to go in there, and then we've got some tabs at the top here. Let me improve the light. We've got some tabs here that the undercarriage is going to sit in. So the undercarriage leg is going to sit in here like so. So we've got these sort of 4 posted pins on there, and then we've got this lug on the top. So it's going to sit in there like that when it's glued in. Okay, now obviously that's going to be sandwiched in between, so that's going to go in there, that's going to slide in there, and that's going to go like that. Now I'm not quite sure how this is all supposed to fit in, because basically that can be anywhere. So I'm going to have a look and see what's going on here, because I'm not sure this is right. I guess the best thing to do is to put a straight edge across here and then set this perpendicular to the center line of the fuselage. But its fore aft position is dictated by the landing gear. So what I'm wondering, if I can glue that bay roof into there and still get the landing gear out. I think I probably can. Yeah. So I want to glue this bay roof into here. But I'm going to have to put the landing gear in. The reason for it, I want to paint all of this together. I don't want to be painting this separate and then gluing it in. I want to paint this all together. So in fact, maybe that won't be a good idea, because I won't be able to get paint along that edge, will I? So I'll tell you what, we'll stick to the instructions. We will do it. We'll paint these as per, we'll build it as per the instructions, and we'll paint them separate. But I'm going to step ahead here while we've got the paint out. We move along a couple of steps here and we're going to actually fit the other side in. Now the other side is a lot more simple. We've just got this plate 23 and the same undercarriage legs going into the other side, and it's saying it's to repeat for front opening. So I think what we'll do is we'll get these off the sprue and we'll paint all of this at the same time, so we can paint the front undercarriage bay, the rear undercarriage bay, both sides, and we can also paint these parts here. So I'm going to get these off the sprue, get them cleaned up, and then we'll have a look at what they look like. So here they are here on the same sprue. So cut that off like that, and then we'll take this one here and cut that one off like that. And there we go. And then that's that all sorted. That's that done like that. So this is the downside. This is, sorry, it's not a downside like a disadvantage. This is the side looking down, and we can see we've got some issues here with the obviously wear on the mould or whatever. So I'm just going to take a 400 grit sanding stick and lightly go over that just to remove that funny squiggly moulded on pattern. Okay, you can see it there. Whether that used to be cabling or something, I don't know, and it's all worn away, I don't know, but I'm going to get rid of it just because, well, because I can. There you go. So there we are. Now we'll take the other fuselage half out of the box. All of a sudden our box is starting to look a bit empty, and you can see that this one is going to go in the same as that other one did, just it's not so wide. So then when we put the fuselage halves together, they are going to meet up something like that. So if we have any issues with it fitting together, we'll have to sand a bit off of here, because you can see that that is slightly deeper. Okay, so we'll get all this painted and we'll go from there. Now I'm going to get some different paints and talk to you a bit about painting, just for the you know, for the brand new beginners and stuff, so that they're not sort of left out in the dark. Right, so painting. Now if you're doing the Revell version of this kit, these are the instructions, and as I think I mentioned in part 2 or even part 1, here they talk about the painting, and they've got their own colours, and this is something Revell do, and it's a complete pain in the ass. They don't actually tell you what the colour is, it just says G, and then they're giving you 2 numbers from their own paint range, obviously, because they're going to promote their own paints, of course they are, but it would be nice if they told you what the colour is. So basically, if we didn't know, if we only had this kit and we didn't know, that could be anything. But basically we know from this manual, because when we look in here, it says that this should be painted colour code K, and K on here is Zinc Chromate. Now, Zinc Chromate is a yellow colour. This is the colour here. It's a yellowy greeny colour. Now, there are a few different variations of this. Different manufacturers have different ideas of it. Don't be too taken by people talking about accuracy of colours and everything, because these colours, the Zinc Chromate and the greens and the interior greens and everything, they do vary a lot. So, you know, from model to model. So basically, if you're doing your run-of-the-mill acrylic paints, you're using Tamiya paints, which is everybody's pretty much favourite go-to. XF4, as you can see, it's called yellow green. It's not called Zinc Chromate, but it's perfectly good for this purpose. So you've got that paint there. So there's your acrylic. You can thin this with water. You can thin it with, I'm sure you can thin it with water. I'm just going to check and find nothing on the bottle that tells you, but I'm sure you can thin it with water, but don't take my word for it. However, I would advise against doing that, because it just makes it even less adhesive to the plastic you put it on. It basically means it just rubs off or scratches off very easily. So this is an acrylic. This is an enamel. So this is very similar. This is the old Hanant's extra colour. God knows how long I've had this. Many, many years. I'm not even sure if they still make it. So this is matte zinc chromate. This is an enamel paint. So this is going to be ideal for your brush painting. And then this one here, this is the Mr. Colour range. Now, this is not to be confused with the Aqueous paint, which I will show you now. This is the Mr. Hobby Colour what it says, water-based acrylic paint. This can be thinned with water. This is Mr. Colour. This is a solvent, a lacquer paint. So this is going to be very much like your kind of single pack lacquer paints. It's hotter than enamel, but it will brush on absolutely fine, but it absolutely stinks. So if you're airbrushing this, you need to be thinning it with Mr. Colour leveling thinners, which I've got some here, okay? Or you could use the AK Real Colours high compatibility thinner. You could also thin it with a drop of cellulose if you wanted to. You'd probably even use a drop of xylene. But basically, you don't want to be thinning this with anything other than those two really, or some cellulose thinners. This one, obviously it's the wrong colour, you can thin with water, although I'd advise again against it. Use this one, or you can use the Tamiya thinners, or you could just use alcohol. This one here, you've got the Tamiya thinners that goes with it, so you can use that one, okay? But if you are using this, I would recommend a primer, because it doesn't tend to stick to the plastic very well. And then you've also got your Viejo. Now, I don't have Zinc Chromate in the Viejo paints, but they also require a primer. They don't stick to the plastic very well either. So I'm going to go with this one, which means I'm going to have to first give it a coat of primer. And for my primer, I'm going to use this one, which is a Mig Ammo one-shot primer. And this is an acrylic primer. You could just lay it down and it goes off beautifully. Now, this is Mig Ammo one-shot primer. Mig Ammo doesn't make it. This is actually made by Badger. It's a Badger Stynylrez is the primer it's called. And you can buy it as Badger Stynylrez. Here in the UK, we tend to have companies that repackage it. So we've got Mig Ammo. I think AK do a version. You've also got UMP. They have their own primers, and they are actually just rebadged Badger Stynylrez primers. Exactly the same thing. And basically, you've got a shaker in there. I can't remember if I put the ball in there myself, but basically you need to shake it up very, very well. Mix it very, very well before you use it, because otherwise you end up with a load of thick sludge at the bottom that you can't use. So it's always good practice to shake it, and then shake it some more. So I'm going to be using this primer, first of all, and then I'm going to be using the Tamiya paint, and I should probably thin it with this one. I may even thin it with this one, and then I'll spray that on. I'm going to use my airbrush. As I say, if you're brush painting, go with the Viejo, go with this one. If you're not going to use a primer, go with your Humbrol or whatever enamel and brush that on. So I'm going to get myself all ready, and first what we're going to do is clean all these parts off. Right, so I'm going to use, for this, I'm going to use IPA, and this is basically, it's about 91 or 95% IPA. What they basically mean is it's 91% alcohol in water. Cotton bud. Just going to go along and just go over with the IPA and just basically wipe over where I'm going to paint, and that will have the effect of degreasing the area. Okay, there we go. And there's my clock going off telling me it's 8 o'clock, and it's a Saturday evening, which means it's actually time to go to the pub. So there we are. I'm not going to worry about the Bombay because I'm going to have my Bombay closed up. I'm not going to have the Bombay open. So that's that one cleaned. And then we'll swap ends. Get the cotton bud in the IPA again. And when I say IPA, I don't mean a beer. It's not IPA keg beer. It's actually alcohol. So there we go. That's that all done. And then this back here. Same again, and this will just remove any residual greases or oils or anything that's on here. And there we are, job done. Okay, and then with these, you can see there was a little bit of dirt on there. You can see it on the cotton bud. So these, just give these a wipe off. I mean, as I say, a lot of modelers don't bother. I mean, for example, and this is in no way derogatory to anyone, I have never seen Phil Flory wash a kit, and I've never seen him have a problem with paint adhesion. So, you know, do we need to do it or don't we? I don't know. But I do quite often with a lot of the smaller Asian companies that are coming out with kits that, you know, quite often Bronco, their kits can be quite oily. In fact, you even find black oil actually on parts of the sprue. So just do these as well. Just give them a wipe over. And some would say, oh my God, you're touching the parts after you've cleaned them. And, you know, some people get very, very anal about this kind of thing. I don't. It's like I said in one of my other videos, I think it was the first one, talked about airbrushes. Some people have to have exactly 60-40 mix on their thinners and exactly this and exactly that. You know, it's not a science. You're making a model. You're not trying to do it all scientifically. You know, like I also mentioned in a previous video, you know, I have sprayed many cars, and you know, I don't mix the paint by weight or anything. Usually you'd have a cup like this that you would mix your paint in, and you've got a scale up the side. You have a like a rule type thing with lines marked on it that will have your 4 to 2 to 1 or your 2 to 1 or your 50-50 mix or whatever marked on there in graduations, and that's what you use. It doesn't need to be exactly precise. And if it's a cold day, you thin your paint a bit more. If it's a hot day, you thin your paint a bit less. If it's too hot, you don't paint because the paint dries too fast. If it's too cold, you don't paint because the paint won't dry. And it's the same with resins and stuff and fiberglass. I've done many fiberglass mouldings for Rocket Bunny GT86s and all sorts. I've still got all the moulds for them actually. But yeah, so you know, all that sort of stuff. If it's too cold, you don't do it because it won't cure. If it's too hot, you don't do it, it cures too fast. If it's a really warm day, use 1%. Use 1% hardener. If it's a colder day, use 3%. You know, it's kind of, it's not scientific. It's just all these figures they give you are a guide. So we've got those parts cleaned, and I've had a waffle. So I'm going to get them primed now. I'm not going to film the priming because I need to get my mask on and everything. But once I've primed it, I'll come back. When we do some airbrush painting with the V8 or whatever, then I'll talk about airbrushing then. But until then, I think what I'll do is just do it off camera. I know I said I wouldn't do anything off camera, but what I meant was building. I won't do any building off camera. In fact, maybe when I spray the zinc yellow, I'll show you that without a mask. So see you in a minute. Okay, so I haven't done the painting yet. I've just thought this is for beginners. I'm taking things for granted. You would know this and you might not. So holding parts for painting. Many different ways of doing it. This is a great little thing. This is a Tamiya product, and it's called a paint stand, and you get two of them well, you get two different ones in a box, and basically this will go on the bench and you can spin it. It's like a lazy Susan. And basically what that does is you can put parts in there. You can stick parts to cocktail sticks, and you can put the cocktail sticks in there and support them. Really handy thing to have. They don't cost very much, and they're brilliant. The other good thing, they come with these clamps. So with these undercarriage legs, I can basically clamp them like this in here, and then I can hold them to paint them, and then I can stand them in there afterwards, and then they can dry like that. The other thing to do is put the other ones in there like so, and the reason I can do that is because the tops of these won't be seen. They're going to be, because it goes in like this, we're going to be looking up through into the undercarriage bay. We're not going to see this top part here, so we don't need to worry about painting that. So we can just put that like that, and then this one can go in there. So we've got those four there, they're ready to go. Now these here, we need to be able to paint the front face without getting any paint on our hands, but we need to get around the edges as well. So I'm just going to sand that edge straight. It's not very straight at the moment. There we go. Right, so yeah, I'm going to get some blue tack, and I'm going to make it into a sausage. Now this has been used probably for about 5, maybe even 10 years for painting. You just keep reusing it. You take it off, make it, roll it around, make it into a ball. You can see it's full of paint. It's got all bits of paint and stuff in it. Make it into a sausage, and I'm going to put this on this piece of wood like so. Again, you can see it's been used many times. So I could just stick that on there, and this is just a piece of scrap wood. I also have a piece of balsa wood I use where I put pins in it to hold the parts. Okay, so that's that on there, so that's stuck down. So now what I can do is put these on here like so, like that, and I can paint them, and I can make sure that I get all around the edges, and they're on there now and they're not going to fall off. So I could hold them now to paint them, and again these I can take off of there, hold them, paint them, and then put them back in. So I'll get this primer work done and then I'll come back. So I've got a little bit of paint left in the airbrush, you can see it down in the bottom there. So I'm just going to show you quickly a little bit of airbrushing for the beginners. This is basically what they call a double action airbrush. So basically you've got two actions. This is air, okay, so you see I push that down, it needs a clean, it's a bit slow to come back up, but basically that's what I push down, you can hear the air comes on. If I pull back, that's paint, that's pulling the needle back and opening the nozzle to allow the paint to come out. So basically when I spray, I push down and then I pull back and it will allow paint to come out. Okay, when you finish, it's good if you're a beginner, get into this habit. Watch this. So many people when they paint, they do this, they go down, they pull back and they let go. Okay, it's a really good habit to go down, pull back, go forward and up. When you let go, basically what happens is the paint is still in the end of the nozzle and the air stops. So you get paint on the end of the nozzle, and then the next time you spray, it spits. So the way to stop that is to actually go down, come back, go forward and up. Don't go down, back and then up when you want to finish. Okay, good habit to get into. So basically with a dual action, it's going to be difficult to see the paint because we're going on grey plastic. Let me get a piece of paper. This primer is going a little bit thick, so it may be a little bit spattery, but you'll get the idea. So basically I'm going to go down with the air, pull back, and you can see the paint starts to come out. Okay, so I can go like that, go down and let go. If I go down, come back, and then just let it go, what might happen when I go next time is I get no, I didn't. I thought I might get a spatter, and we're basically blocked up now. This is what happens when the paint gets thick. Now when I go down now, I didn't get it. You'll often get spatter. I'll show you that another time. So basically I'm going down, pulling back, and you can see the paint. If I go all the way back, I get more and more paint. See what happens? More and more paint. The air pressure doesn't change, it's just the paint. And if I go really close, I can get a very tight line, and if I come further away, I'm not moving my finger at all, I'm not doing anything. If I go back down, get really close, you get a really fine line. Okay? If you really want to get fine, you can basically take the end off, and then you'll just have the needle sticking out. So we've just got the end of the needle sticking out there, and we can go in and we can do really, really fine work. Now, if the paint was thinner, it would be much easier to do, but basically I can go in here. You can see it's getting blocked out where the paint is so thick, but basically I can go in there, I can write my name just like so. So really, really good for doing fine camouflage work on little 72nd scale aircraft and stuff. And as I say, this paint's a little thick, but I will cover this again. But yeah, and you can also do your spraying with no nozzle on there. I'll just show you again. Go in close. Go in close, like that, and then as I come back, you can see the pattern gets fatter and fatter and fatter. And there we go, we're pretty much out of paint now. And the airbrush needs a really good clean. It's clogged up here and it's clogged up here. So anyway, the primer is done. Put this nozzle back on. Always put nozzle back on. If you touch the end of that needle on anything and bend it, that's it, it's over. So and water parts are quite expensive. So so there we go. So the primer work is done. You can see we got the primer on here. I hope you can see it because it's grey on grey. So I'm going to let that go off now for a good few hours, and then we're going to spray it with the Tamiya XF4. As I say, I'll use the Tamiya thinners because I've got a primer down. I know it's going to stick very well. And as I say, this Mig one-shot ammo, this Badger Steinerres, as an acrylic primer, I think it's probably the best on the market. There are many other primers you can get, like this MRP one, which is a fine surface primer black. They do a black, they do a white, they do a grey. Very, very good primer. Really, really bonds well to the plastic, but it absolutely stinks. So you need to be using a spray booth, open window, mask, extractor, you know, everything. Whereas this stuff you can get away with just an open window and mask. But anyway, and also with this, don't use this. This got this stupid design top on it. Maybe I can show you on this one. Maybe it'll open. It's got this. I haven't used it on this one, as you can see. What happens is when you use that top, okay, you pour the paint out, and as you can see, what's happened on this one, you get all the paint in here all dried up and everything, and it's all like bits and pieces of scaly paint. And what happens is that comes out when you pour it into your airbrush, and it blocks your airbrush up. So don't use that. Just unscrew the lid and pour it in. Okay, that's the best way to do it. There's a million different designs of these special bottles that have dispensers on them and everything, and none of them seem to work. I mean, the MRP ones, they have this cap that flips up and you're supposed to be able to pour the paint out. Nah, doesn't work. They're awful. The only ones that actually do work really well are the Viejo type dropper bottles, and they do work really, really well. So if you are a drop counter, that's what they call them when you mix your paints, the Viejo bottles are for you. So there we go. Undercarriage legs are done. Obviously all the bays are done in there, so it's going to be 24 hours for me, a couple of seconds for you, and we'll come back and we'll get some green painting done, or zinc chromate painting done. See you in a minute. And we're back, and it's now Sunday. This is the next day, so all this primer now is going to be really good and dry. Now, I've been thinking, before we go on and actually start doing any painting, I also need to paint the area around the cockpit and the tail gunner, and that's going to be black. So what I'm going to do there is use a black primer, the same stuff, this grey primer that I used on here. You can also get it in black and various other colours. So we can do that, we can degrease that, and we can use the black primer, and that'll be that done. Now, I've found some pictures of the insides of of both ends, and they are sort of fundamentally black, so that's what we'll do. I may go over them with a darker grey, we will see. But what I want to do, before we push forward with anything else, I want to clean this fuselage up, because we can see that all over the surface, you can see here, I can get it in the light, you can see there's ejector pin marks down the edge, and that's going to really affect the way it goes together. There's one there, 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 and then we come along, there's one here, there's one there, there's one there. They're all the way over, so we need to be getting rid of those and making sure they're sanded out. We've also got flash, like you can see here around the cockpit. There's a piece of flash there that needs to be cut away and sanded out. On the other half, we've got a big piece of flash here in the tail gun area. You can see that's got to go. We've also got flash here on the cockpit. So basically going to go round. Now to get rid of this flash, I think what I'll do is do this big one here first, just to show you. We need a nice sharp knife, and we need to find the edge that is good. Don't just go piling in with a knife and trying to cut things away. Find an edge which is good. So you can see on the inside here, you've got this molded lip, and that is actually where it's supposed to be. So if we take the blade has got an angle on it, obviously we're on the cutting edge. So if you angle the blade in like this, you're going to cut in. If you angle the blade like that, you're not going to cut anything. So you sort of hold the blade. If I can just show you on my finger, if I cut like this now, if I push forward with that knife, I'll cut my finger. If I do this, I'm not going to cut anything. But if I stay flat, you can see I roll the knife across, and it's the edge of the blade is just trying to cut into my skin, but it can't. So that's what we're doing. We're keeping the blade flat. So we're going to remove the flash, but we're not going to be cutting right back, so we don't risk cutting in. That's what we don't want to do, is cut in and destroy the surface. So that's that. Now we can get in there with a sanding stick and try and sand it. It's going to be quite difficult, so I think we're going to have to scrape it. So just lightly scraping with the edge of the blade. And I'm going to cut in again, because that flash looks like it's getting a bit thicker. So yeah, I'm going to have to try and get in there and sand it. And I think what I'll do is actually put the fuselage halves together, because we've got flash on this side as well. So I can do the same thing again, keeping the blade flat. I'm going to come in and just trim like this. There we go. Now I think what I'll do to get in here and sand get it all cleaned up, if we put the fuselage halves together and hold them together like this so we can get them lined up. Now here's a 400 grit Matador sanding stick, so I can get here, I can also sand the top, and I can also sand the edge of that instrument panel there. And the idea is to get it all nice and level, so that when we put it together it's nice and square. You could actually come along and put some rubber bands around this if you wanted to and hold the fuselage together. But I'm just going to hold it for now. And just sand that. The reason I'm doing this now like this is obviously once the cockpit is in and everything, you don't want to be doing this and filling the cockpit up with sanding dust. So I'm going to try and get it as good as we can now. There we go. So I'm happy with that. We need to do a little bit of work on the top edge. In fact, I am going to tape this together. So just get some cheap decorator's masking tape. Tape this together. Like so. Put a piece down here. Another piece on the top here, so that's going to hold it together better. I'm just going to sand lightly across the top there on the back edge, and there we go. Now when we actually put this together we'll have to deal with that seam, but for now that's quite good. Now we'll do the same on the back end. I'll keep the fuselage halves together. The other thing I've noticed is, if you can see here, as we move down the fuselage, it's almost like one side is a different length to the other. So I think what I'm going to be doing on here is removing the pins and adding some alignment tabs, because we can't actually physically line up the fuselage at the back end. You can see this side is shorter than this side, whereas when we get to the front, we're okay. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get around that. I've actually got another kit. Maybe the other side is better. We'll have a look. Yeah, bit of a problem there. So this flash here, again, keeping the knife flat. I'm going to cut this away. Make sure I don't cut into the plastic. In fact, I think back here what we'll have to do is cut this to fit the clear part, because there's not really a definite edge there to cut to. We've also got some flash up on there, so just sand that away. Okay, so let's get the other kit out and see if I can find a better match with another half. Nope, I've got loads of different halves and tried them all different combinations, and they're all the same. So I was kind of hoping that maybe over different periods of time, maybe if I've got a kit from sort of 1975 and a kit from 1999, maybe the moulding process had changed, or you know, the cooling times or whatever. So that didn't work out. So just going to go along now and just remove bits of flash that are going to affect things before we get painting, really. So we've got a little bit of flash around these wheel wells, as you can see here. You can see there's some there on the edge of that one. Okay, so we're just going to come along with our knife again, keeping the knife straight. Don't try and cut in. Cut along rather than in. There we go. So just sand that away, sand along there. You can see we've got some here as well. Just going to trim that out. There we go. And then the same on this side. Yep, we got flash there. Just sand that away. You can see we've got flash and like a funny mould line there. So I'm going to take a skinny stick So this is one of the floory skinny sticks, and just sand that away in there. The other thing you can get for yourself if you're going to get into the hobby, this is actually the Premium Hobbies set, and this is a set of Infinis. You've got the Infini sponges here. I've done reviews on all of these, but these are the Infini sponges, and then you've got the Matador sticks here, which are the smaller ones. Then you've got the zebra sticks across the back, and on the right here you can see we've got the PE sticks, and it's basically a piece of photo etched stainless steel, and you can get this self-adhesive. I've got my piece of denim here, just rub that on there, clean it out. You get this self-adhesive abrasive paper that you stick onto the back. So you've got all the different shapes there. You've got little narrow skinny ones and everything, and they're brilliant for getting into tight places. But because they're hard and flat, they're good for stuff like this. You can get in there and you can sand that, and it won't round it off. It'll keep it all nice and straight. So we can sand away that. I really need to replace the paper on here. That's actually filler in there that's got it all clogged up. There we go. And then again, coming down here, we've got go. Okay, so that's that done. And we've got some flash there in that crew entrance hatch, I think that is. There we go. So there we are, that's all done. Okay, so when it comes to actually putting the fuselage together, we'll deal with the edges then. In fact, no, we won't. We'll do them now, because then we won't be making a load of new dust and everything for our paint. So I'm going to use this 220 grit zebra stick. These zebra sticks, if you do get them, you'll see me using a 220. When you get them when they're new, they're quite coarse. But then within literally 5 minutes of using them, they seem to break down, and then they stay. So a 220 is probably more like a sort of 300 now. So just sand along here, and I'm just going to make sure I get rid of any raised areas. I want the mating faces to be nice and smooth. You can see there's ejector pin marks there, they're gone now. Okay. And we've got the pins to work around. Okay, so working around these pins, making sure I don't sand them down. And I'm not going in and taking away loads of material, I'm just gently sanding. Now you can see we've got an ejector pin mark there, which is shallow. So I'm not going to sand that away, because otherwise I'll end up with the mating faces not being flat. I've got the same there, you see that one's shallow. So we're going to have to use some filler in the seams anyway. Be careful not to snap this bit when you sand it. There's a pin there that's broken off anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to have to rearrange my bench, I think, because I think once we start getting this thing together, we're going to run out of space. In fact, I'm going to remove that pin anyway, because I don't want it there. It's causing it to be misaligned. We've also got some flash down in there. Look, we'll have to clean that out. Clean that away. Right, so I'll get the other side done the same, sanding it out, and then I'll be back. We can see now that where I've sanded the fuselage and removed that rear pin, already we've got a much better fit on this tail end. So so it's worth removing. All the kits I've got are the same, so yours will be the same. If you remove that pin there, just that last pin, that helps everything line up a lot better. If you wanted to, you could also remove these two here, but I don't really think that's necessary. But you can just see now with that little bit of sanding, it just goes together so much nicer. I'd also like to ask you a question, guys. What would you like to see me do? Would you like to see me repair these raised panel lines using stretched sprue, or would you like to see me just sand all the panel lines off and have a completely smooth model? Up to you. The other thing we're going to do is remove this here, because this here is a hook which is basically designed for hanging it from if you're going to hang your model from the ceiling, and I'm not going to do that, so I'm just going to cut that off just like that. I'm not going to worry about that because we're going to deal with the seam anyway. So what we've also got those on the wings that we need to get rid of. So but if you are going to hang your model from the ceiling, I wouldn't trust these little locations anyway. I would put the string around the fuselage. So there we go. We're also got the other thing we've got to do. If you look along here, if I can catch it in the light and show you, you can see along here we've got sink marks. You see here, there's one there, there's one there, and these sink marks will look awful on the finished model. So we're going to have to fill those, and basically what they are, it's where you've got these location pegs on the back. It's a thicker section of plastic than this is here. So obviously where you've got a thicker section, it cools slower than where there's a thin section. So its cooling rate is different, therefore its shrinkage is different. So it just shrinks, and that's why you get that. So basically you will find it anywhere where there's a thick section. You can see here where you've got this big peg here for locating the undercarriage. You can see on the back here there's a sink mark. So you get that wherever you go. You see a lot of the modern kits, they will actually take care of that. Wherever they put a lump, they'll put a hole in the middle of it or something, or they actually make a separate part so you don't get these sink marks everywhere. But we'll deal with that. These scribe lines here, obviously these panel lines here will have to be replaced or whatever. These lines here, this is something manufacturers used to do many years ago. In fact, they even used to put like mould into the side of the fuselage, the position for the stars and bars, and they'd have USAF moulded on the wing as a raised line. These lines here are literally just to mark out where the walkways go. So you've got them on these, you've got them on the tail planes. To show you here, you see these raised lines here. They're just literally for the tail, for the walkways. So we won't have to replace those. But if we do decide to, repair the panel lines with stretch sprue, we'll go down that route, and but we won't worry about replacing this line here. So and I also intend, rather than using decals, I intend to use masking tape. So what we'll do is we'll paint it black first, or a very dark grey. Then we'll put masking tape over it, paint our whole model, and then when we take the masking tape away, you end up with a black walkway line on there, which is a real nice way to do it. So and if you haven't got the Revell kit, then you won't have the walkways in your decal set anyway. So there we go. So that's the fuselage ready to go. And let's just finish off this video with a little bit of painting. Right, so a few times through this video we'll go through the basics of painting using airbrush. And this is, as I said, this is my old trusty Iwata Revolution BR. It's getting on 10 years old now, I think. And I don't particularly look after it very well, but I don't abuse it either. I keep it fairly clean. But as I say, some people get quite anal about airbrushing. I don't. So if you do see me doing something that you don't like and you're an experienced modeler, please don't put comments that you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. I know that people think I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that, but the fact of the matter is I do this and I do that, and it doesn't cause me any problems. So I'm really not interested in listening to people saying, oh my god, you should never put the paint back in the pot, or you should never mix the paint in the cup. If you want to carry on mixing your paint in little plastic cups and adding to the the piles and piles of plastic we've got on this planet to deal with, then you carry on. So but I'm going to use the AK high compatibility thinner purely because it's not as smelly as the other thinners I've got. It's still quite smelly, and I should be doing it in a booth, but I'm going to do it here on the bench on the camera for you. So I'm risking my life for you guys. Look at that. So right, always put the thinners in the airbrush first, because otherwise you'll end up, what happens is the first, whatever you put in there first goes down into the needle down here. So if you put paint in first, you'll end up with thick paint down in there, and it will give you a false idea of what your mix is like. So put the thinners in first. So I've got a pipette here, you can see it's quite dirty, and I use it time and time again. So I'm just putting a drop of what I think is going to be about 50-50 in there. So straight away put the lid back on the thinners. You don't want to be knocking that over. And then all I'm going to do now is take some paint on a brush. Now don't use a new brush, especially don't use a new cheap brush for this, because you'll get hairs coming off. So I'm going to go right into the bottom of the paint. I have given it a good shake, but you'll normally find there's some sort of thicker paint in the bottom. I'm just going to wipe that off on the side of the airbrush like that. And I'm just going to put 3 good brushfuls in there. And that's going to be a roughly 50-50, 60-40, whatever. I don't really care. It's just basically until it's like sort of milk. You just want the paint to be like the consistency of milk. When you pull it up the side, of the airbrush, I don't know if you can see there, it should run down and have some colour to it. You don't want it to be so thin that it's like, you know, it's just going to fall away. So I'm just going to put that brush to one side, put my airbrush down, and put the cap back on the paint. And now I've got the airbrush set to about 18-20 psi. Oh, first thing to do, put your finger over the end of the nozzle, just pull back and just blow back. So what that's doing, it's pushing any thinners that was in the nozzle around the needle, it's pushing that back up into the paint, and it also gives it another little mix for you. Okay, now a lot of people say you shouldn't do this, you'll damage stuff. There's nothing to be damaged. All you're doing is the air comes out around the side of the needle, okay, and what happens is as the needle comes back, the Venturi effect pulls the paint out of the needle and then it atomizes with the air, and the air pushes it onto the model. When you put your finger over the end, all you're doing is pushing the air back up past the needle. Nothing's going under pressure, you're not damaging anything. Some people say it'll damage the seal back in here. It won't damage the seal in there because the pressure is coming up there, it's not going back there. So basically the first thing you want to do is check your flow. So I always use a piece of scrap paper. You can use the tissue paper, but it never gives you a good, if the paint is too thin it'll just soak straight in, whereas with the paper it'll run off. So just checking our flow, and we've got a nice pattern there. So I can see we've got some good opacity of the paint. So we'll go straight on to painting our model. And the first thing to do, blow everything off. And don't just blow off the parts, blow off the wood, blow everything. All I'm doing is using air just to blow everything off so there's no dust. And then I'm going to just lightly start to paint this. And I'm going to build it up in layers. I'm not going to go in and make it soaking wet. Okay, you can see this, just lightly building it up. And coming on the other side. As you can see, I'm not flooding it. Now, another way you can do this if you want to, and you'll see Phil Flory do it all the time if you're on his channel. What he will sometimes do is use the paint neat. And just turn the pressure up and blast it on. It's a good quick way of doing things, but as part of this kind of tutorial, I just want to show you kind of the way I would normally do it. I'm going to make sure we get all the angles here, because obviously if we just go straight down we won't get the sides. If we go in from one side you won't get the paint in this side. So we've got to go in. We've got a little bit of dust in our paintwork there, I can see. Looks like it's actually in the primer. We're not going to worry about it because, you know, it's up in the wheel well. Okay, so once we've done that, we go back to the beginning again and do it all over again. And in a minute I will show you on the fuselage, I will show you what not to do. You can see the colour building up. Okay, we're out of paint, so I've got to mix some more paint up. Right, paint mixed up, so go back and start doing some more. And there we go. So that's them pretty much done. There we are, that's them done. Right, so let's get a fuselage half. I'm going to show you now what not to do. Okay, so I'm going to go into this area here because we're not going to see it. Now, don't ever be tempted. If you go, I'm going to blow it off, blow the dust off first actually. In fact, I've just noticed I've got some areas here I need to clean up, so I'll get that done. Right, show you what not to do. If you're on bare plastic and you're using, say, something like Vallejo paint, okay, be careful of doing this. Be careful of going too thin, because what happens is the paint will tend to dry before it gets on the plastic and it will just wipe off really easily. You need to be kind of painting it on like that, okay? Now, the other thing is if you're using Mig Ammo paints, they're like a polyurethane. I personally don't like them. You have to lay them on very, very thinly and build them up. Otherwise, you will get what's called fisheye. It will just all separate. It has has surface tension. It doesn't want to sit on the plastic. So basically, the way to do it is to build it up, as I showed you just now. Okay, don't do this. You see what happens when you do that? You got way too much paint down there. It's sitting there thick. It would run. It will sag. It would do all sorts. That is not the way to paint a model. Okay, here's the way to do it. Just lay it on like so and let it build up. Okay, and that's about as heavy as you want to go. I'm going heavier on here because the finish doesn't matter as much as it does on those parts I've just done, because you can't really see any of it unless you really try to look. So that's that done, and then we can turn it around and we can do the front. go. The other thing to do is make sure you come in from all the different angles, because if you just go this way, these back of these, you can see the back of these lugs here, they're grey. You don't want them to be grey, you want them to be zinc chromate. So make sure you get in there on all the angles. Okay, I'm at the paint again. So that's because I put so much on here. So I'm going to mix up some more paint, get this finished, and then I'll come back and we'll say goodbye. Okay, so there we go, all done. That's everything, all painted up and all looking dandy. So that's our zinc chromate yellow done. So now the next thing we've got to do is paint the undercarriage legs, and they're going to be a silver colour, and that's going to be, oh, one thing I did want to say, when you've got your grey primer on, as you can see, you can go around and look and you can check that all your seam lines and everything are gone, and you can see what a lovely difference it makes to have those, like on these legs, to get rid of those ejector pin marks, get rid of the seam marks, and just make it look like a round cast leg, which is what it is, rather than a piece of moulded plastic. So there we go. So, and also then with your primer on, if you have got a bit, like I can see a bit there where I've still got a bit of a seam line, I can just come in with a knife, just take that away, job done. So it means that tiny little area there doesn't have primer on it, but it doesn't matter. So we can take another one, have a look at it, do the same. We can see we've got a little bit of a seam line in there, so I could just take that away, but I'm not going to worry about that too much because the tire is going to cover it. But no, everything else I'm happy with there. So there we go. Actually, no, there's a seam line in there, look. We just cut that away. Just cut that away like that. Okay, job done. So the grey primer, because it's a matte colour, will always show up any seam lines that you've missed. So that'll be for part 4. Thanks for watching, guys. Happy modelling, stay safe. Bye for now.